All right. So, Perry Mason, Season 2, Episode 2. And things are starting to move along. So, arrests were made in the death of Brooks McCutcheon. And when they first start, they don't tell us what evidence they have on these two kids. We find out later that one of them, I think it was Raphael, his prints were found on the car, and they were found with Brooks McCutcheon's gold coin or something. Lucky coin. Not so lucky, I guess. But anyway. So, Perry decides he's slowly hearing about this case. Plus, he's still dealing with that schmuck Sonny, who we find out is getting money from Brooks, or at least he thinks he's getting money from Brooks. So, the family of these two boys asks Perry for help because of what he did for Emily Dodson. And it's like, you saved her. And he's like, no, I didn't. And then we find out that she killed herself. I mean, I saw the document, but I couldn't read it. So, in the last episode. So, this, if you guys knew it last week, I didn't. This is the first time I'm learning about it. So, he's still stinging from that because she just couldn't recover from what happened to her. And it's not Perry's fault. I mean, her son was murdered in a brutal, brutal way. Her baby was murdered. I mean, her baby was murdered. She still had to go through that hell, regardless of whether he got her off or not. She still had to go through that. So, I don't know why Perry's blaming himself, but I guess because he cares about justice so much that he does take it personally, because he puts so much of himself into these cases. Which, how did he survive as long as he did? I mean, I love Perry Mason, but yeah, he's headed for a mental breakdown. But anyway, so he refuses it, and Della tries to help come up with excuses as to why, besides the fact that they're just concentrating on civil law. And so he says no. And but then after he does say no, Della goes to return Maria's doll, which she left in the office. Which, as an aside, either that secretary isn't who I thought I saw at the trial last week, or she's Perry. She saw that Perry wasn't thrilled at all about what he was doing, and so she stays with him anyway, because nothing was said. So I don't know which one it is. But anyway, so Della goes to return the doll, and the two ladies are thrilled because they think that she's taking the case. But, she tries to, no, I'm not, we're not taking the case, nothing's changed. But you can see she wants to take the case. In the meantime, Perry is doing some investigating because he cannot believe that a scared kid could shoot that well. So he goes to visit them and ask them to shoot, pretend they're shooting, and he has to assure them that their families came to see him and he just wants to check something out. But he's not their lawyer. Okay. You certainly are acting like it. But anyway, so after this, nothing is said about this public defender who just, completely ghosted them, ignored them. And based on the way the judge acted and the assistant DA, I'm gonna say racism. And the girls totally know it too. They're not idiots. Um so anyway, so Perry decides to do some of his own investigating. So he goes to the locker where the car of Brooks McCutcheon is stored. And he decides, and he knows there's a dog there. So he puts something, I think it's chloroform, on this bone, on this chew toy for the dog, and the dog immediately goes to sleep. So he's able to waltz on in and look at the car. And, just a moment. Okay, sorry, spam call. Anyway, so anyway, he looks at the car, does some measurements, just like he did with the boys, does some measurements, and to find out if it was possible for them to have even shot the guy. And he deems that that's not possible. They could not have done it. First off, he didn't even think that they could because he didn't think they were capable of, because they're just kids who, and that's a really good shot. So they decide that they're going to take the case. And to finance their endeavor, they decide to basically bilk Sonny. They convince him that he could, have all these stores and he could expand to all the locations in LA. And I think this is twofold. Number one, they need the money to finance this case. So that's number one. And number two, I don't think that either one would be upset if he were to go bankrupt, if he were to just lose everything, because Perry was never happy about what he did. So he's more about justice than he is the word for word law, because technically what he did last week was correct, but he just felt like shit because he ruined some guy because one guy is an asshole and he told him that. So they that's how they're going to finance their operations. Now, Della, while she was operating on her own and not talking to Perry about this, went on a date with Hamilton Berger. And we discover that he we discovered that he's also gay. So that explains why he was totally cool with Della being a lesbian and in a relationship. I mean, obviously Perry doesn't care either, but like I said, this is the 30s. Homosexuality was illegal, so I'm still waiting for a shoe to drop on either Della or now Hamilton about their homosexuality, because not only was homophobia ripe, it was legal to be homophobic. It was stupid. So because Della mentioned that his perfect woman would look like Clark Gable. So they go to this, function that was supposed to be organized by Brooks, and it's basically turned into a memorial for him instead. So we meet this piano teacher. I think her name is Camilla. And Hamilton gives his hand to Della and says, "Squeeze it so I don't fall asleep, if you see me falling asleep." And Camilla calls her on, like, "How did you manage to keep him awake?" So obviously she's well aware that he's not into classical. He prefers jazz, which I get it. I like jazz. I like classical too. I don't generally fall asleep to classical, but yeah, I love jazz. So, so, then let's see, what else was I going to go to with Della and Perry? Yes, I'm going to just totally ignore the boxing match. Is this going to be the way it is, that she's going to have a date with this woman, with this Anita, and she's going to have some relevant saying that Della's going to use on Perry? Is that how this is going to go? Because that's going to get annoying very fast. Actually, it already is. So, Perry has to get these kids off so they're not in jail throughout the trial. And I felt bad for these kids. I actually was surprised that when Perry met with them that they weren't all beaten up, because when they were thrown into the jail, they were looking up at these guys, like at these people around them, like they were menacing because they surrounded them. So I expected to see them bruised and beaten, and they weren't. But anyway, so he goes to court for their arraignment and their bail hearing. And Milligan is an obvious racist, because he just assumes that they're going to go to Mexico because they're Hispanic. So they're going to run away to Mexico, and where they can blend in. Because that's not a racist dog whistle at all. Now, either Perry wasn't thinking or just decided to ignore it or make him scream, "I'm a fucking racist," by saying, "What do you mean they'll just blend in? They're not from Mexico." So that could either mean that because they're in a migrant camp, that could either mean they're from a different Hispanic country, or they were born in this country. And just because they're still living in Hooverville, that's why they still have the heavy accent. One of those two. But either way, it says a lot about Milligan. I can see I'm going to absolutely hate him. So, and then Perry said the best line when it's discovered that the forensic report was leaked, and it mentioned that one of the boys, I think it was Raphael, it would make more sense if it was Mateo. Mateo is the aspiring mechanic, but I think they said that Raphael's fingerprints were found on his car. So Perry, with the best line of the episode, said, "I just wish Milligan was as dumb as I wanted him to be." So, but they claim that they have evidence. Now, Perry just totally shit the bed when it came to their bail hearing. Seriously. Why are you trying to do the judge's job? It's just, yeah, that was just sad. I'm sure that everybody was thinking, ugh, and we wanted him as our lawyer. Why? Why did this happen? So yeah, I felt bad for the kids. So now we know that Hamilton is also gay. So that makes sense that they're going to be pairing him with Della, because neither one of them are interested in the other in any way, shape, or form. So good to go. Let's see. Oh yes, Paul. How could I miss Paul? So Strickland had told him that he was worried about someone wanting to take out Perkins. Well, we found out who wanted to take out Perkins in this episode. So Paul goes up to him, gives him what he has, and gives him the pictures and tells him about him being a loan shark and blah, blah, blah. But that he gives back to all that money back to the community, so it's all good. And Strickland takes that info, and the next we hear is that Perkins was arrested. And you could see the look on Paul. He was not feeling well. Actually, if Strickland was in the house at that time, if he had gone over, I think he would have gotten really stabby. He would have murdered Strickland, which, can't blame him. That I would consider that justifiable homicide, because Strickland tricked Drake into he tricked Paul into doing his legwork, because he knew that if he told him the truth, that Paul wouldn't go for it. So Paul goes to Perry, and Perry swears he knew nothing about it. And I believe that, because Strickland is scum. Now, Strickland was hanging out with Perry earlier on, and he was talking about a horse or diving off the high dive or something. And I really wonder what their relationship is going to be like now that this happened, because I'm sure Perry is not going to be happy with Strickland whatsoever, because it sounds like he and Paul have a similar moral code, that technically what these people were doing was illegal. Like, technically, what this kid was doing was stealing proprietary information, and so he had to go down. But on the other hand, is what he was doing really that bad? Same thing with Strickland. Yes, he was a loan shark. Yes, that isn't a good thing. But at the same time, he was kind of a Robin Hood. So yeah, they're more of ends justify the means kind of guys. So their sense of justice isn't black and white. And so Perry's like, yeah, I knew nothing about that. Sorry. And when Paul asked him, well, how are we going to fix this? He goes, I have no idea. And Paul then relaxed because that was a good answer. Good answer. And so they go to investigate. First, they go to the evidence locker, which we had seen earlier. Someone had put a piece of paper in a billfold. So, okay, already we have planting evidence. And I'm sorry, I thought that when someone gives someone evidence from the evidence locker, which it had to have been Holcomb, because why would you, sign out evidence for someone to look at? You're not going to do that for any Joe Schmo. But they did the same thing with Paul and Perry. They completely ignored them. They could have easily been planting evidence. So whoever's in charge of the evidence locker is a complete idiot. But anyway, so they see a note that says Santa Monica. Now, while this is happening, Della and just Della goes to the library. I assume it's a library. And she's doing research, and she discovers that Brooks isn't paying his bills. So she assumes that he's broke. And my take on it is, well, let's see, considering what's happening in the real world right now, it could just be he just doesn't like paying people. What better way to get money and make more money than you normally would than if you just didn't bother to pay people. But they decide to go check out the Morocco. And Perry did point out that the Lux went down and was a much more luxurious ship, like a couple of weeks before the murder. So yeah, even though the father went to see Brooks, I'm still not completely writing him off as a suspect. So they go to the ship, and Perry can go through the front because he's white. Let's face it, that's the only reason. And Paul meets him by going through the back way, through the underground, where he goes into the kitchens. And I have to admit, the person they were talking to didn't go off on Paul for, being black. So, that may because Perry was there. But anyway, so Paul goes and he talks to the kitchen staff, and Perry looks around the ship. And he pretends to be a complete moron talking to one of the women working on the ship. I'm not sure. I think it's the same woman who Brooks was having a relationship with. And as he was searching the ship, he discovers that Holcomb is on the ship. And Holcomb calls him, identifies him as Detective Mason. So, how does he not know he's a lawyer now? I mean, does he not advertise? Or I know this is LA, so LA, I'm sure, is a very big city at this point. But really, how do you not know that he's no longer a detective? But anyway, they decide that he can't leave the ship because nothing screams, um, everything we're doing is completely on board and innocent, then stop him from leaving the ship. So, of course, Perry gets away and he grabs Paul. He's like, yeah, we have to get out of here. And Paul manages to punch them and shut the door behind them. And they end up back in the casino. And they seem like shocked that they're back there. Okay. And so Holcomb ends up on the other side, and it looks like he was going to, have his goons grab Perry and Paul. But Perry somehow puts a spotlight on Holcomb. And Holcomb's like, yeah, you got me. And so they end up getting off the ship. And I'm trying to think of how the episode ended. I think I've covered all the. Oh, silly me. So at the earlier part of the episode, this George Goldstein, which we saw was a supplier for Brooks's ship. He wait, was it for Brooks's ship or was it for Sonny's produce? Maybe it was both. But anyway, he was served a subpoena, which he was not happy about. And then a goon comes and uses a press, what looked like a iron press, panini press, I don't know, some sort of press. And flattened his head like a grape. I'm so glad they just showed the blood dripping and not the actual act. Ugh, I don't think I could handle that. So then this Mr. Griffin, I think was his name, got a call saying that Goldstein is dead. And so he takes out his own grand jury subpoena and burns it. So obviously he's somehow involved in Brooks's business. We just don't know how. So the suspects just keep growing, none of them being anyone from Hooverville. So yeah, I still have the father, I still have Holcomb, even though to have Holcomb be the big bad of, the overarching bad of this season would probably be a bit much. But he started off the first season as a dirty cop, so maybe he's going to be the overarching villain of the series, that it's going to be a more like Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty type cat and mouse type game that they're playing. Only in this case, Perry doesn't know just how bad of a person Holcomb is. Let's see. So that's how it ends. And yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen next episode. And yeah, it's nice to see that the band is back together. So we'll see how this is handled moving forward. If there's going to be a falling out between Berger and Milligan. There could be all sorts of drama that goes on. And hopefully now that Drake has steady work, that Perry's going to probably be back to criminal law. I'm going to say that Paul will be able to move out of his brother-in-law's house, which will be great for everybody. I think that's all I have. Oh, and at the end of this episode, they had a behind the scenes discussion with the cast about their characters and what's happening this season. And I know that Juliet is English, and I know that Matthew Rhys is Welsh. However, I'd forgotten, especially Matthew Rhys, enough so that when he started speaking, I was pleasantly surprised to hear his accent. And so yes, he has a very, very lovely Welsh accent. Juliet has a nice British accent, but I really like Matthew's Welsh accent. And so yeah, that's basically was episode 2. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.